I'm Sarah, 32F, and my relationship with my father has been complicated for as long as I can remember. My parents divorced when I was just 3 years old. I have vague memories of heated arguments and tension in the house before they split. My mom always tried to shield me from the worst of it, but even as a toddler, I could sense something was wrong. After the divorce, my dad quickly remarried and moved to another state. His new wife, Linda, was from a wealthy family and had never worked a day in her life. They settled into a lavish lifestyle that was worlds apart from the modest apartment my mom and I shared. Growing up, I only saw my dad a handful of times each year. He'd send child support checks regularly, but that was about the extent of his involvement in my life. Our visits were always awkward and stilted. He'd take me to expensive restaurants or buy me elaborate gifts, but we never really connected on an emotional level. My mom, on the other hand, was my rock. She worked long hours as a nurse to make ends meet, often picking up extra shifts to afford little extras for me. Despite her exhaustion, she always made time to help me with homework, attend my school events, and just talk about my day. She encouraged me to maintain a relationship with my dad even when I didn't want to. As I got older, I realized how much she sacrificed for me and how little effort my dad put in. I remember one particular incident when I was about 10. I had a big piano recital that I'd been practicing for months. My mom had requested the day off work weeks in advance to be there. I had also told my dad about it, hoping he might make the trip to see me perform. The day of the recital came, and my mom was there, beaming with pride. My dad, unsurprisingly, was a no-show. He sent a text later saying something came up at work. I was devastated, but my mom comforted me and took me out for ice cream afterwards. It was a pattern that would repeat itself throughout my childhood and teenage years. When I was 12, my dad and Linda had a daughter, Emma. I met her a few times over the years, but we never developed a close relationship. It was hard to connect with a half-sister who was so much younger and who I barely knew. Plus, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of jealousy seeing the attention and affection my dad lavished on her, attention I had craved for years. As I entered my teenage years, I became more resistant to visiting my dad. Our time together was always superficial. Shopping trips or fancy dinners where we struggled to find things to talk about. I started making excuses to avoid these visits, throwing myself into school activities and friendships instead. My mom never forced me to go, but she always gently encouraged me to keep the door open. After I graduated high school, I went to a state university about an hour from home. My mom had set aside a small college fund for me, and I worked part-time to cover the rest. My dad offered to pay my tuition, but I refused. I didn't want to feel indebted to him or give him a way to control my life. This decision seemed to both surprise and hurt him, but I stood firm. During college, I made even less effort to stay in touch with my dad. The occasional phone calls dwindled to just birthday and holiday greetings. I was busy building my own life, making friends, and exploring my interests. I dated a bit, but nothing serious. My mom remained my biggest supporter, always there with advice or just a listening ear when I needed it. After graduation, I landed a job at a marketing firm in the city. I threw myself into my career, working long hours and steadily climbing the corporate ladder. I made new friends, traveled when I could, and generally enjoyed my independence. My mom and I remained close, talking several times a week and meeting up for dinner whenever possible. Everything changed when my mom was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer when I was 28. I was devastated. She had always been the picture of health, always taking care of others. Now, suddenly, she needed someone to take care of her. I immediately took a leave of absence from work to be with her during her treatments. The next 2 years were a blur of hospital visits, chemotherapy sessions, and brief periods of hope followed by crushing setbacks. Through it all, my mom remained positive, always more concerned about how I was coping than about her own suffering. My dad called a few times to check in, but he never visited. He said he didn't want to intrude, but I couldn't help feeling abandoned all over again. Despite everyone's best efforts, my mom passed away when I was 30. I was completely lost. The woman who had been my rock, my biggest supporter, my whole world was gone. I felt adrift, unsure how to navigate life without her guidance and love. To my surprise, my dad stepped up during this difficult time. He came to the funeral and stayed for a week afterwards, helping me sort through my mom's things and just being there for me. We had some good talks, and for the first time, I felt like I was seeing a different side of him. He shared stories about my mom from when they were young, and I learned things about her I'd never known. It didn't erase years of absence, but it was a start. After he went back home, we stayed in better touch. We'd talk on the phone every couple of weeks, and he even came to visit me a few times. It wasn't a perfect relationship, but it was better than it had ever been. I started to feel like maybe we could build something real, even if it was later than I would have liked. A few months ago, my dad called to tell me that Emma, 20F, had been accepted to a university near where I live. He asked if I'd be willing to let her stay with me for her first semester while she got settled. I was hesitant. I barely knew Emma and wasn't sure about having a roommate. But my dad seemed excited about the idea of us bonding, so I reluctantly agreed. Emma arrived last week, and it's been a disaster from day one. She's messy, inconsiderate, and seems to have no concept of personal boundaries. She helps herself to my food and belongings without asking. She stays up late playing loud music and leaves her stuff strewn all over the apartment. When I tried to set some ground rules, she rolled her eyes and said I was being uptight. The final straw came yesterday. I came home from work to find Emma had thrown a party in my apartment without asking. There were at least 20 people there, many of whom seemed drunk. My living room was trashed, and someone had spilled red wine on my white couch, a couch that had belonged to my mom and held sentimental value for me. I lost it. I kicked everyone out and told Emma she needed to find somewhere else to live immediately. She started crying and saying she had nowhere to go, but I stood firm. I helped her pack her things and called her an Uber to a nearby hotel. My dad called me this morning, furious. He said I was being cruel and selfish, and that family should stick together. He accused me of holding grudges from the past and taking them out on Emma. He even threatened to cut me out of his will if I didn't let Emma come back. I'm hurt and angry. I feel like my dad is trying to make up for his absent parenting by forcing a relationship between Emma and me without considering my feelings or respecting my boundaries. At the same time, I worry that I'm overreacting and being too harsh on Emma. Maybe I'm letting my complicated feelings about my dad cloud my judgment. So, Reddit, AETA for kicking my half-sister out and refusing to let her stay with me? Update 1. It's been a week since everything went down with Emma, and a lot has happened. First, I want to thank everyone for their comments and perspectives. It's helped me process my feelings and gain some clarity. The day after I posted, my dad showed up at my apartment unannounced. He had flown in from out of state, supposedly to fix things. I was tempted not to answer the door, but decided it was better to face this head-on. When I opened the door, I was struck by how tired and old he looked. It was a stark reminder that he wasn't the larger-than-life figure I remembered from my childhood, but just a man, flawed and human like the rest of us. Our conversation started tensely. My dad tried to guilt me about Emma, saying she was young and just needed guidance. I stood my ground and laid out all the ways she had disrespected me and my home. I also expressed how hurt I was that he was taking her side without even hearing me out. As I spoke, memories flooded back. All the times he had disappointed me, all the important moments he had missed. I found myself voicing hurts I hadn't even realized I was still carrying. To my surprise, as I talked, my dad's demeanor changed. He seemed to deflate, sinking down onto my couch with a heavy sigh. Then he did something I never expected. He apologized. Not just for the current situation, but for years of being an absent father. He admitted that he had always felt guilty about how little he was involved in my life growing up. When he left my mom, he said he convinced himself that a clean break would be easier for everyone. But as the years went by, he realized how much he had missed out on. He spoke about watching me grow up in snapshots, a reluctant teenager during his occasional visits, a determined college student rejecting his financial help, a grieving daughter at my mom's funeral. Each time, he said, he felt more and more like a stranger in my life. When Emma was born, he saw it as a second chance to be a good dad. He admitted that he overcompensated with her, rarely saying no and giving her everything she wanted. He realized now that he had done her a disservice by not teaching her responsibility or consideration for others. He also confessed that he had hoped Emma living with me would be a way to bring us all closer together, to create the family bond he had failed to nurture when I was younger. We talked for hours, delving into issues we'd never addressed before. I shared how it felt growing up with an absent father, always wondering why I wasn't enough to make him want to be around. He opened up about his own insecurities, how he felt he could never measure up to the amazing job my mom was doing raising me. It was emotionally exhausting, but also cathartic. For the first time, I felt like my dad was really seeing me and hearing me. At one point, I brought out some old photo albums my mom had kept. There were pictures of me at various ages, school plays, sports events, graduations, all moments my dad had missed. As we looked through them together, I could see the regret on his face. He asked questions about each photo, genuinely interested in the stories behind them. It was bittersweet, sharing these memories that he should have been part of. At the end of our talk, my dad said he understood why I couldn't have Emma living with me. He promised to help her find alternate housing arrangements and to work on teaching her better life skills. He also committed to working on our relationship, suggesting we start having regular dinners together to stay connected. It felt like a small step, but an important one. As for Emma, I did agree to meet with her one more time. My dad brought her over the next day, and she gave a tearful apology. It seemed more genuine than I expected, though I'm still wary. She admitted that she had taken advantage of my hospitality and had never really considered how her actions might affect me. She spoke about feeling pressure to live up to her mom's wealthy background and my dad's expectations, which had led her to act out in destructive ways. I made it clear that while I'm open to slowly building a relationship, I'm not ready to live together or be super close right away. I explained that trust takes time to build, and that her actions had seriously damaged any potential for trust between us. She seemed to accept this, though I could tell she was disappointed. Emma is now staying with a friend from her new university while she looks for a more permanent living situation. My dad is helping her navigate this and also encouraging her to look into counseling to work on her issues with entitlement and responsibility. He's also taking a more active role in teaching her practical life skills, something he admits he should have done years ago. I'm cautiously optimistic about the future of my relationship with both my dad and Emma. It's going to take time and effort, but I think we're on a better path now. I'm proud of myself for standing firm on my boundaries while also being open to reconciliation on my own terms. There's still a lot of work to be done, and I know there will likely be setbacks along the way. But for the first time in a long time, I feel like there's a possibility of having a real family relationship with my dad, and maybe even with Emma. It's a strange feeling, equal parts exciting and terrifying. Only time will tell how it all works out. Update 2. It's been about a month since my last update, and I wanted to share some developments. Things have been progressing slowly but steadily with both my dad and Emma. My dad and I have been meeting for dinner every week as planned. It's been nice to have regular, uninterrupted time to talk and continue rebuilding our relationship. He's been more open about his past mistakes and his hopes for our future. I've also been sharing more about my life and my feelings. It's not always easy, but it feels like we're making real progress. One particularly meaningful moment came when my dad brought over some old photo albums he'd found. There were pictures of me as a baby and toddler that I'd never seen before. As we looked through them together, he shared stories about those early years that I'd never heard. He told me about the day I was born, how nervous and excited he was. He recalled my first steps, my first words, little moments that I had always assumed he hadn't been around for. It made me realize how much of my own history I didn't know, and how much my dad had missed out on by being absent for so long. These dinners have also given me a chance to learn more about my dad's life. He's opened up about his own childhood, which was far from idyllic. His father was an alcoholic who was often abusive, and his mother struggled with depression. He admitted that he never really learned how to be a good father because he never had one himself. It doesn't excuse his absence in my life, but it helps me understand him better. As for Emma, we've had a few brief meetings, always in public places like coffee shops. She seems to be making an effort to be more considerate and less entitled. In our last conversation, she admitted that she'd never really had to face consequences for her actions before, and that getting kicked out of my place was a wake-up call. Emma has found an apartment to share with 2 other students from her university. She's learning to budget, cook for herself, and manage her time. All skills she apparently never developed living at home. It's been an adjustment for her, but she seems to be rising to the challenge. She told me about struggling to do laundry for the first time and how she had to call our dad for help deciphering the washing machine settings. It was a reminder of how different our upbringings were. One interesting development is that Emma has started asking me for advice about school and life in general. It's a bit strange being in a mentor-like role for someone I barely know, but I'm trying to be helpful without overstepping. I've shared some of my experiences from when I was her age, both the successes and the mistakes I made. She seems genuinely interested in my perspective, which is a nice change from her previous attitude. My dad has kept his word about not pressuring me to have a closer relationship with Emma than I'm comfortable with. He seems to understand now that forcing things will only push me away. Instead, he's encouraging both Emma and me to take things at our own pace. He's also been more proactive in his parenting of Emma, setting clearer boundaries and expectations for her behavior. I'm still processing a lot of feelings about my childhood and my relationship with my dad. There's a part of me that's angry about all the years we lost, but I'm trying to focus on the present and future rather than dwelling on the past. It's not easy, but I think it's the healthiest approach for all of us. Last week, my dad invited me to a family dinner at his house. It would be the first time I've been there since I was a teenager. I'm nervous about it, especially about seeing Linda again. Our relationship has always been cordial but distant, and I'm not sure how she feels about my renewed connection with my dad. I haven't given him an answer yet. Part of me wants to go, to try and bridge this gap, but another part is scared of being disappointed again. Update 3. It's been about 3 months since my original post, and I wanted to provide one final update. A lot has changed, mostly for the better, but there have been some challenges too. My relationship with my dad continues to improve. Our weekly dinners have become a highlight for both of us. We've had some difficult conversations about the past, but we've also shared a lot of laughter and created new memories. Last week, he surprised me by bringing over my old bicycle from when I was a kid. He had kept it all these years, hoping to one day pass it on to me. It was a bittersweet moment, but it meant a lot. Emma and I have slowly been building a relationship. We're not close, but we're friendly. She's been doing well in her classes and seems to be maturing. Last month, she invited me to a small art show where some of her work was being displayed. I was impressed by her talent and touched that she wanted me there. We grabbed coffee afterwards and had a nice chat about her aspirations in the art world. However, not everything has been smooth sailing. About a month ago, my dad's wife Linda reached out to me. She was upset that my dad was spending so much time with me and accused me of trying to come between them. It was a tense and uncomfortable conversation. I tried to explain that I wasn't trying to monopolize my dad's time, but she seemed convinced I had ulterior motives. This led to some awkwardness with my dad. He was caught in the middle, trying to balance his relationship with me, Emma, and Linda. We had a few difficult conversations about it, but ultimately, he stood up for me and our right to have a relationship. He's been working on helping Linda understand the importance of this reconnection for both of us. The family dinner I mentioned in my last update did end up happening. It was interesting, to say the least. Linda was polite but cold towards me, and I could feel the tension in the air. Emma tried her best to keep conversations flowing, but there were still plenty of awkward silences. My dad seemed stressed, constantly trying to keep everyone happy. It wasn't the warm family gathering I think he had hoped for, but it was a start. One positive outcome of the dinner was that I got to see my dad interact with Emma in their home environment. I noticed how patient he was with her, how he encouraged her to talk about her art and her studies. It made me wonder how different things might have been if he had been that kind of father to me when I was growing up. It's a bittersweet realization. Through all of this, I've learned a lot about forgiveness, boundaries, and the complexity of family relationships. I'm not sure what the future holds, but I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm proud of the progress I've made in setting and maintaining healthy boundaries while also opening myself up to new relationships. Last week, I visited my mom's grave for the first time since all this started. I sat there for a long time, telling her everything that had happened. I like to think she would be proud of me for giving my dad and Emma a chance, but also for standing up for myself. I miss her wisdom and guidance now more than ever. As for what's next, my dad has suggested a family therapy session with him, Emma, and me. I'm considering it, though I'm not sure if I'm ready for that level of intensity yet. Emma seems eager for it, while I'm more hesitant. It's just one of many decisions I'll have to make as we continue to navigate this new family dynamic. I want to thank everyone who offered advice and support throughout this journey. Your insights have been invaluable. While things aren't perfect, they're better than I could have imagined when I first made that post 3 months ago. I'm looking forward to seeing how things continue to evolve, even if it's not always easy. For now, I'm taking it one day at a time, trying to balance building these new relationships with maintaining my own life and independence. It's a work in progress, but then again, isn't that what family is all about?